Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well and dealing with kind of in a way, in a in moments of forced introspection, if you can think of them. One thing about this COVID dilemma that we've had in all of our countries is that it allows us to come face to face with the idea that we, let's say, engage with ritualistic ways of living life. We are constantly involved with doing various things and have been prior to COVID that are really basically natural for us and have become natural for us because we've utilized that time in a manner that made some sense to us at that time. It's just kind of logical. Now, if we're not a little bit careful, we'll be responding to it in a manner that becomes ritualistic as well, not being comfortable, being devaluing our time somehow, instead of getting to the point where we can consider the possibility of doing some different things. One of the most wonderful things about attempting to do something that's slightly different is it can bring our attention to what we're attempting to do, whatever it may be, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, so-called. I happen to believe that all of those are spiritual, as you probably realize, to some degree, and on a continuum from course to universal. Some are less coarse, some are more coarse, some we believe are the only things that we need to do, and they may be coarser than what we think they are, or they may be more spiritual than what they think they are. But nonetheless, they're all wrapped around and cozy this thing we call a personality, which is quite natural and quite normal in our world. So looking at things from a slight distance, in other words, allowing ourselves to take a look inside about what's happening inside, we won't do that all the time, so inadvertently, off and on, and beginning to try and understand that no matter our set of circumstances, we will have responses, we will have determinations, we will have an understanding that may or may not even be true, but nonetheless, it makes us feel comforted to have that understanding. And those understandings can shift and change. That kind of interaction with our day-to-day enables us to begin to realize a broader purview. My goodness, this is what I do. My goodness, this is interesting. What will happen when things become generally better? And we shift our attention to perhaps something of that ilk. We could do this, we do that, we do this, do that, and all the rest of it. But at the same time, if we could bring ourselves to just watching slowly how we function, not to negate, not to judge, not to assess, but just to notice, we would be learning how to see how those that relate to higher states are involved with perceiving us on these lower states. There's no negation. There's perhaps appreciation from time to time in how we deal with things that are not so easy to deal with. Also, recognition that they may have been through these times or similar ones, different ones, prior to their being more involved with these higher states. Process is a huge word, very small one, but huge one. And in our looking at things from a processive point of view, we begin to understand that we have a tremendous amount of vulnerabilities. And we're always reflexively attending to them somehow and filling in little gaps of space that we could be using to look generally, not with great intensity, because we have to be on the lookout and check these things out. Not like that at all. Learning how to notice is a precursor to understanding. Never is there a need to negate. However, there is a need to understand. We can't understand it all, or perhaps some might be able to understand it all. Certainly, no one in the middle ground of living life can understand it all in terms of no rules being pertinent and vital for an exchange with a higher spiritual energy. We have tremendous lists of rules to do exactly that. They actually might be helpful from time to time, but certainly spiritual interaction with a human being can happen when a human being is imperfect. This is a vital thing to attempt to understand, because even in the ideas of loving and being compassionate and attempting to view others in very positive manners, even if they're not that positive, then provokes the idealism of rules and regulations that have to be followed to become this or that, especially spiritual. Can you be a jerk and still be involved with higher states? And an additional question, not even notice it. That implies that another question needs to be answered. Can you use a tremendous amount of energy coming into you for the purpose of doing things that are not helpful to others? I would submit that watching yourself, no offense to anybody, all day around others, and you will begin to notice that that may be true. You may not consider things negative to others, but others may consider them not so friendly to them. So there's no perfection in this, but there are many illusions and many delusions. In spite of all of that, there is a movement towards helping the species grow that you can partake in by doing simple things differently than you did before. By noticing the hurts you have in you and the defenses that you come up with. By realizing that their hurts are many and they congeal together for a kind of shell that validates your need to construct a defensive form, even with and against things that are not necessarily, they don't necessarily have a great need to be defended against. If you've ever had a conversation with another friend, and the friend is quite legitimately in love with an idea, and you are quite legitimately in love with another idea. Now, this is an act of love, right? You defend your position in these things, and the friend defends their position. It is shocking sometimes to see that the positions are very close together, but the words are not. One explains things in one way, another explains things in a different way. The words are the thing that's focused on, and not the understanding or the recognition of a link between the two ideas. There are tremendous links relating to understanding that are never seen. If you ask a person, here's a question. Ask a person what love means to them. You'll get tremendous definitions. And ask a person what good is to them. You'll get all kinds of definitions. Ask a person what spiritual is to them, and you will hear the definitions of how a person needs to be valued relative to a belief. That belief may be real for them, that one person. It may not be the same belief that might be called real with another person. But out of those two beliefs, here's a significant thing. There is a tremendous engagement with the highest of highest ideals or form, whether it be based on traditional beliefs currently in play, or ancient beliefs, or a recognition that there is the unknowable kind of loving that is so profound, that is so difficult to bring words to. Have one experience of that profundity, even close to that profundity, and you can never forget it. If another has not had that experience, they may have a refinement of words or a straight belief in a certain way of thinking. This is what makes it very difficult for all of us. Not the idea of different words, but the fact that we have an instinct about that there is something. Others have an instinct there is nothing. But that belief in the nothing cultivates a loving towards the ideal nothingness. No one can talk them in or out of anything other than what they can come up with. That is not a negative thing. That's an individual journeying through them, devoid of something, still expressing that something in terms of the idea that they are defending. There's no negation in this. There's a tremendous level of loving in it. There is a depth in it, an ache in it, that person could only perceive something that related to whatever it is others might have perceived, then that would be a recognition, a point of reference where they could allow something beyond a current way of expressing that level of engagement with higher states. The same may be true for a belief that others have related to spiritual orientations. God only knows how many times we grumble and moan about other people's belief not being as able as others. In fact, they are growing through them towards the same. No offense to anybody. Point of reference, or that experience of that oneness, is so profound if it affects an individual that individual can never forget it, because it has been brought to their attention. And the attention, the second, the moment, the moments that it was there has colored all of their way of believing prior to that. That is like an infusion of a higher state into a lower state. That oneness, that ache that everyone searches for in life has many faces, including the love of family, the possible love of family, the love of a street you live on, a scenery that you really believe is touching, a nation that you believe for sure is at the apex of how things should be in terms of freedom, in terms of understanding, in terms of relationship with each and every individual in the nation, with each other. Our dilemmas are many. And are deemed to be complicated. And rightly so, I guess. Because if major questions are asked of us, we squirm to answer them. Sometimes even honestly. And we can't find the right words, the words that would be our words. So we search introspectively in a kind of a funny, reflexive way. If a question is asked and is spontaneously asked, we search for the words that will try and help us to express what we think we should express for the ears of another, or what is expected, or we attempt to express what we can about what we really are trying to understand for ourselves. The latter is probably not expressed well. The other parts, we've had a lot of practice in coming up with words for other people, so they'll think that we're okay and all the rest of it. The way we do it, and the intensity with which we attempt to understand things. But when a single second of loving occurs in us, regardless of what it's attached to. That 1 second is a valuable moment. The next second, of course, is different because we then begin to protect our relationship with what should be said or what we believe or what is valuable according to some level of understanding. This is valuable to us. One could say, yeah, but Ron, it sounds negative. No, it is valuable to us if we can allow ourselves to consider what we said. 1 second of watching at the same time and allowing ourselves to attend and wonder whether we actually believe what we just said might be a spirited moment inside of us that allows us to add something, to soften something. We're not doing it for other people. We're doing it for us. That sounds very selfish. It's not. If you can express love for others, not verbally, internally, you'll come face to face with the realization that love is actually flowing through you. You'll perceive it. And that is part of a process of movement towards perceiving. I know most of us have, it's the world of TV. Well, that's dying out. But nonetheless, we still have TVs. We can watch Christmas programs. We can watch love programs. We can watch all kinds of programs that bring out in us emotion. Some say emotion is not so terrific. I disagree. Emotional thinking, by judging parts of us, I would agree that's not so great. In other words, it puts walls up inside and outside of us so that we don't act a certain way because that's not a good way to act. We think a certain way because that's the right way to think. Loving has nothing to do with that. But it doesn't mean doing that is negative. It's doing that kind of thing is a normal position for a person who naturally, reflexively, rhythmically, and ritualistically do that kind of thing. It can also happen when a person who isn't doing that kind of thing on a day-to-day runs into a situation where they are affected and something touches them internally. And they feel that emotional response, that sense of loving that gets turned on inside for a few seconds and makes you breathe a little bit faster, or, whoa, what was that? An encouraging moment in that place would be the individual watching, allowing, recognizing, and beginning to understand that there's an aspect of them that shouldn't be put down or lifted up, just recognized, experienced, and realize that it's an aspect of loving, some loving internally that's being touched for a second. It affected you. That's it's a moment related to coarser levels, perhaps, or maybe even the middle ground, but nonetheless, that is a moment. if you could learn how not to broadcast that moment, but always remember it, and see if you could engage with it again in a caring manner, allowing it to be okay within you, but not the only thing you have in you. Because on these levels, you have to have a broad palette of emotion. And fortunately, we do as human beings. We have tremendous amounts, some nice, some not so nice, some good, some not so good. And those experiences allow us to realize that in our perceiving system, our energetic perceiving system, that energy comes in and it is translated by an internal translator into views relevant to our biases, as I have talked about before. But also, in those wondrous, loving moments that we might experience, is a feathering outwards of energy into the tighter spots that we have acquired in life for the purpose of being considered, according to some rules, valued. Those valued moments are moments when you can calm your emotions and still engage externally with others in a logical, sequential manner, basically related to the tune of what you have to do to be valued by others. Definition orientation. And in fact, what you don't know is too much of that or too little of that engagement emotionally bothers others. Their screen, their sensory screen, the mechanism that they make sense of with energy coming in, moves up into the mind, and the mind recognizes the biases of an individual and then responds. Very little thought has been into that, but there is profoundly quick responses to it. We have learned how to speak quickly, respond quickly, and to advance our views quickly so that we will be considered valuable, more valuable than somebody else. Here's one to try to make sense of. In all of the folks that I've been lucky enough to meet or fortunate enough to meet who have the ability to perceive energy in another's deep down internal workings, those folks are not impacted by a person's presentation. They're impacted upon by the relationship that they have within them. What does that mean? It means how the inner chakra system or Sephiroth system, these valves can function broader and find a middle ground, how they make sense all the way through and are linked all the way through to the top of the head. In the early goings of these, the dominance of the root center is profound. You can have tremendous amounts of energy coming into you that you can barely even stand up. It's so strong, but it's still related to the root center, all the way up to the top of the head. This, many people would give their eye teeth to have. It means, in some people's view that you are becoming more spiritual. In fact, you still maintain a relationship with your personality. You are still self-interested. In our world, this is not a negative thing. But you are preparing for the link-ups with a gonad center, the will center, and usually in everybody by this, not everybody, but most of our population, according to some, the root and gonad center are strongly linked, and they move through the system up to the top of the head and are anchored in the front part of the head. They're anchored there because the system inside is always glowing with that resonance. What you do with that resonance, that energy, what you do with it is called a personality. There is a movement then into the solar plexus, and the three link together to do the same thing all the way up, but what you do with it is related to your personality. Within a stage of that emotional, profound flow of energy that is connected to the whole of the species and any other species that does exist, it's a plane of reference throughout the whole of the universe. Sounds weird, but nonetheless. A logic can be cultivated in the brain, it's called mind, intellect, that can engage with a person very quickly. And it is honored in our world very highly. And that's legitimate in our world. There's no negation in this. The next movement, though, is the opening of the throat and the brow beyond the energy that can be coming through those three lower valves up into the brow and the throat and somewhat into the crown center. The cultivation of this broadening begins to enable the personality to take a look at what it's doing as if it is watching itself. It's an aspect of the mind, actually a part of the emotional mind, but it's an aspect of the mind that is slightly beyond the intellect. The intellect being, from my perspective, you don't have to agree with this, is the emotional, mental aspects of how to function and how to protect what you believe is true. This is clearly how we do it here. This other movement into a slightly different level of mind creates a gap. If you begin to watch how you're functioning, no judgment, no negation, no elevation either. You're just watching. It's a booming movie. When you start doing this, you start to notice ideas will pop into your mind, into this thing here. This, see, the terms are very difficult, right? Into your brain, you call mind. I call part of mind too, a lower aspect of mind. And you can be considered brilliant because you had this happen. You still have a propensity to believe it is your constructive way of what you would call thinking, that's this idea came up. Now, some people would call it the unconscious, making sense of things. Some people like Jung would talk about the collective unconscious. If ideas have already been spun, then that can be picked up by a mind that is forming into and towards another level of itself. We often call this intuition, as I said. Most of the times when somebody says, is there such a thing as intuition? I often say no. Yeah, there is. Because it's really a developmental process towards linking into a higher state of human development. So far, so good. And then the emotional mind begins to soften down. There's less defense, but there's still defense, but there's less defense, but there's more consideration of something other than what it already came up with and believed is true. The relevance of that level right there is that there is a broadening inside and a quietening down of the emotional, reflexive, and intellectually focused mind. That mind is focused there so that you can be reassured that you're okay and you're really able. And it's quite efficient under some circumstances when you're inquiring into things that you don't have any idea about. You can come up with many ideas, but it's as if those ideas are dropped into your head and you perceive them, because you're now learning how to perceive that which was not you in the emotional, intellectual sense, but you were open enough to allow ideas to move into your mind, into your brain. So, and since you're used to looking at you watching you, that includes you seeing an idea drop into your head. This is a really powerful pause and a pivotal part of your broadening and movement into a different level of mind, which will still include other levels of thinking. You don't erase stuff and throw it away. It's all a part of you. All of your life that you've led from age 0 is still a part of you. And you can see those multiplicity of levels. I was talking today to someone and I said, try this. In a year, how many days are there? Everybody knows this. How many hours in those days? Arithmetic. How many minutes in those days? Arithmetic. How many seconds in those minutes, in those hours, in those days, in those weeks, in those years, months and years? And then realize that every second of your existence, you had responses to things, whether they were blended over for about 30 seconds, blended over for about 10 years. I think that should never have happened. That's real terrible. Yeah, I agree. How long did it blend over? Will you ever have the same responses you had then? Yes, you will. You've cultivated those responses, and you will be like electricity, bouncing back. You don't need to jump and worry about not being able to function. You already trained yourself to function. So here we go back into mind. Slowly, When your focus begins to be focused beyond the you that you believe you are, you begin to resonate slightly differently. Your throat center is opening slightly differently. That is a will center, but it's cultivated. It links up beyond the brow, beyond the crown. But the throat center and the brow are tied together. They come in here. Sometimes you can notice energy moving up to the throat, up through the face, out through the temples, but over into the top of the head, where sensing is prevalent. And in the back of the head, it moves around, opens areas that can enable you to broaden out, to be differently insightful without only looking at what your ideas are and then preserving them through insights that help to do that. That's only part of the journey. The next level of that is to move into those insights and beyond them into a broader perspective beyond what you already believe is true. Now, that last statement causes trouble. We're already competitive in our relationship with life. We can't help it. It's called survival. What can I come up with to survive? And yeah, better than that person, and better than that person, and better than that person, and better than that person. That's fully focused on our personalities. Bias training, it has always been that way. We engage with religions that way, philosophy that way, new ideas that way, ideas that are yours versus somebody else's. If you look far enough and wide enough in your research related to ideas, you will always find someone who has touched on that idea somewhat, perhaps, because they've been floating around for a long time. The next level of engagement with mind is that you find out mind is involved with the body. Mind is involved with the emotions. Mind is involved with that thing you call personality. Mind is involved with spirit. Emotions are as well. And an energetic form is as well. We leave this physical stuff behind ultimately, but in the meantime, it's also involved with higher states. Now, this kind of thinking, because of our relationship with others physically, sexually, you could say, and our nature, part of our nature has been to combat and battle our way through life. Terrible metaphors, but nonetheless, we use them. Nations use them. Cultures use them. All kinds of uses of these combative orientations. They're coarse, but they're part of the course or development of existence. But our physical form can be spiritualized. It has an act of love in every cell of its system, same as our emotions. And we use ones we're used to using. There is a dynamic engagement with life. We are functionally dynamic. we find out a little bit about this when we are in siege by things like pandemics, when we ache to do something slightly different than what we're doing, as we get used to or not used to complaining about not doing anything. Then do something. If you're at home, cultivate something you never did before. That will frustrate you because you have to go beyond the bounds of what you previously thought were the things to do. And that is an emotional movement. Actually, sometimes a very physical movement. And sometimes a highly intellectual movement. To broaden out our willingness to enter into a different level of engagement with life is part of the human condition, but as well a part of a movement into a spiritualized world where focusing on something beyond our own self or self-interest and finding out there is something beyond that is a frightful thing, because then we want to run and get back into what we're doing before, so we don't edge our way too deeply into something beyond what we know. This is natural. It's the nature of any moment that has not experienced that deeper loving. And even then, in spite of that, there are memories that are part of our way of living, reactions, resentments, loving of things, expressing of things in a particular way. We fall in love with how we express things, doing something slightly different. Can happen for a short period of time, but we run back into the seclusion of our zones that are more comfortable to us. If you can watch that happening, then you can pull away a bit, make a gap. Try to perceive the relationship you have with energy going on in you at that time. Take your focus off your personality and put it onto perceiving or attempting to perceive the energy that lies within and around you. Many years ago, there was a method that I tried to teach, and it was really strange. I said, when you're meditating, and in those days I could cross my legs a lot better than, and my knees were quite a bit more flexible. When you're meditating, put around you an invisible bell, a huge one, big church bell, way up around here, way out to the sides. And be aware inside of that bell, as if it doesn't exist. It exists in your mind. It's a kind of visualization, you could say, but without intense visualization going on. Don't make sure that it's perfect, not relevant, but a territory around the head, all around you, behind you, to the sides, to the front. And then, when you have it, be soft, really soft. Use prayer, use mantras, use whatever you can relate to that fundamentally makes you feel better inside in attempting to relate to a higher state. And then begin to soften your physical meditation sphere, how you are or great you are in meditating, or just the form itself, as if there's no form there at all. An empty bell that's already invisible, an empty you that's becoming more invisible. And watch and be as aware as you can, just being there. You may slip out of awareness. You may go like this. If you do, pull back on the lower part of the neck softly and draw up slowly as possible the head, and try to be aware and keep that awareness going. You can do that as many times as you want. And maintain your awareness so that slowly you know for sure you are without body, any kind of engagement with the you. At first, you will get it and you'll get it right, and that's engaging with you. I never said get it right. Get it to the point where you can allow yourself to be so soft that your focus is on the bell, not you. You are disappearing. Empty. The Buddhists, I also told you about one that the Buddhists use. I like that one too. It's very effective. When you sit for meditation, become aware inside of you as if you were totally empty. You have to be very gentle with this. And then extend your awareness off the body, sides, back, below, front, above, until you can be aware of that focus softly without being aware of you. Take some practice. Go slowly with that. Same with the bell. Both those systems will help you learn how to watch inside in your day-to-day with no judgment. If you, in either one of those techniques, find yourself falling asleep, when you do wake up, do the pump and continue to do it for at least 10 minutes more. Why? Because it will help you to become more conscious, yet not focusing very much on your form. Form is not negative. It's just, it's composed so relevantly to our versions of how we validate the personality. You're trying to get out of the validation of your personality into an understanding or a perception to some degree that you can engage with deeper levels of perception that relate to the energy that's in and around you. There are many levels of that perception as well. Many refinements, all of which are just to be noted and valued, all of them valued as precursors to another level of engagement with higher states. I think that an understanding through experience of that involvement with deepening your relationship with loving is akin to cultivating that sense of being without what you need to be validated as you. You do not need to be validated as you to be valid. You are all valid human beings and valued. This is key. We're not taught this well. Some are valued highly because they are defending against not being valued. Some are valued highly because without that, they would fall apart. And that may be true, but chances are it wouldn't be true. Some are not valued and they feel terrible not being valued, and they bought the farm as they've been trained that way. The training disturbs them from understanding and perceiving that they are valued and worthwhile as a human being. All human beings are of value, no matter what. I think what we're going to do now, if you don't mind, is we're going to meditate for about 45 to 50 minutes. And I wish you well. I want to thank those of you who have sent questions in. We're in a bit of a hiatus now. We could use more questions. If you think about the questions that you might ask yourself, I'll try and send them in. I'll try and do the best I can with them. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Now we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding. And good night, everybody.